They've done it. The Marlins have made a move. 2022/23 offseason is off and running. Mean Jean Segura to the Miami Marlins on a 2-year, $17 million. All of the reaction on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England. Good morning, top of the morning to you. Welcome to Locked On Marlins, your daily Marlins podcast. I, of course, am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on Twitter at Miami Marlins _UK. Last night was a perfect example of why on Twitter I have notifications off. It was absolutely buzzing. So when I woke up this morning, opened the phone, chaos going on, tagged in the Jean Segura news by about 50,000 people. The Marlins have done a deal. Craig Mish alluded to it a few days back to say a deal was expected. Someone then doubled down to say, who is it going to be, a center fielder or who in center field? He then alluded to the fact that it wasn't position specific. Maybe this was the deal that Craig was alluding to. This may have been in the works for some time. Nevertheless, Jean Segura is a Marlin, a reported two-year deal, $17 million. Not clear or whether there's any opt-out to or anything along those lines. We'll wait and see and get more details. However, the headline news, the Marlins have gone and made a splash in free agency, acquiring Jean Segura, former Philadelphia Phillie. So we've seen plenty of Jean Segura. My main memory of Jean from last year was an absolutely amazing walk-off hit and bat flip like you've never seen before. So for me, it was against the Marlins. That was against the Marlins. I've got no problem with that. And I've got no problem with the additional swag being added to this Marlins clubhouse, lineup, roster, however you want to phrase it. But the Marlins get a deal done. 2-year deal for Jean Segura. What are we thinking, guys? How are we feeling about Jean Segura? What I'm getting the vibes on Twitter was, this is a good deal for the Fish. A nice deal. 2 years, $17 million. It felt undervalued in some ways for the player. Also, middle infield guys, they were starting to really thin out. This probably was the best name still on the board. A lot of other fan bases commenting on the tweet that, hey, why didn't we pull the trigger? The Giants, the White Sox, a few others, fan bases looking to think, hey, we needed this guy. This is the funny thing about the Fish, and we'll really dig into this in the second part of the show today, is what's the wider ramifications here for Jean Segura, a second baseman, being signed to a 2-year deal? The Marlins already have a second baseman, the Bahamian stud. He can play shortstop. The Marlins already have Miguel Rojas at shortstop. 1-year deal remaining on Miggy. They don't really have an option at third base. Could this be one of the guys shifting to third? We'll dig into that later in the show. I think there's some big, big ramifications here for the way the Marlins and this roster will be constructed once all said and done. However, Jean Segura, what do we get? The first thing I have to say is Jean Segura 2. So it's not like he's a young buck. As the back end of this contract, he'll be 34. He missed some. So that's the other thing to call out is Jean Segura missed around about a third of a season, maybe slightly over a third. So that's another flag in some ways. But in terms of what we're getting, if he's healthy and on the field, what do you get with Jean Segura? You get a nice contact hitter with some power, some speed, and above average second base defense. He's a career 275 guy, something in that range. Also, the interesting bit, having a brief look at his numbers this morning, he was very good against lefties last year. Very good. And he's a right-handed hitter, so the Marlins add another right-handed stick into the mix. And he's also performed against lefties, which was something the Marlins were absolutely desperate for in 22. Their performance against lefties was just atrocious. It was embarrassing, which is surprising as well, considering the sheer number of right-handed hitters in the lineup. But guys like, as I mentioned, Miguel Rojas, previously really good against lefties. Last year, he was even worse against lefties than he was against righties. So the Marlins have got in Big Gene, Mean Gene. I think the profile is nice in many ways. He's just a straight up hitter. He's a straight up hitter that will 280 at best. I mean, Marlins Park, Lone Depot, it's big. Mean Gene, it could be good. There's some power in the stick. There's some speed. I don't think, in terms of free agents, this guy is a major league player. There's not tons of risk. Yes, apart from the injuries last year, there's not a ton of risk. You kind of know what you're getting from Jean Segura now. The question is, how will he start to age as he gets into 33 and 34? But we've seen it with like a Miggy Rowe. The defense definitely hasn't dropped off. And also, the 2-year deal is intriguing because, as I've mentioned a couple of episodes back, effectively the whole of the Marlins infield is a free agent after next year. So apart from Jazz. So the Marlins are thinking ahead perhaps here of actually solidifying one of those spots already. I think it is a very intriguing move for the Fish. I like the profile. I like the player. I like the swag. Interested to see on the contract structure. Can he stay healthy, Gene? If he stays healthy, what are you going to do with him? Where are you going to play him? Some talk about, hey, shortstop. No, he hasn't played shortstop since 2019. He's not a shortstop, so let's rule that one out. Can he play third base? Maybe. Maybe he can. The arm is okay and good enough for third base. The Marlins already have, Wendell, LeBlanc, Groshans, Birdie. Tons of guys have all played third base. So the Marlins aren't bothered who they put out there. They've done this before. If they think that they can get okay defense out of Jean Segura at third base, keep Miggy at shortstop, keep Jazz at second, Coop and another at third, so be it. The interesting bit here, we're talking about Justin Turner deal. Justin Turner at third. Justin Turner's not a third baseman anymore. He definitely couldn't play that spot, I don't think, like Jean Segura probably could, or even Miguel Rojas could. There's no reason why Miggy couldn't slide out to third if required. I think this is a very intriguing one. But for me, what would I do? What do I think the Marlins are going to do? I think they're going to plug Jean Segura into second base. I think they've got him in to play second base, a right-handed stick, and that's his position. With that, the question then comes, what happens to the guys that are already on the roster? We're going to cover that really shortly, but before we do that, remind episode. Our good friends over at BetOnline, and it is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. All the latest odds, trends for every professional amateur league out there, from pro football, college bowl season, basketball. They've got it all at betonline.net. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And then, where does the fun start now for the Marlins? Let me just have a quick sip of this coffee. Okay, it is still morning time here. Fresh, top of the morning. So what happens next? What does this mean for everyone else? If Jean Segura is plugged into second base, which I believe he will be. For me, when I've looked at all the indications here, Jazz Chisholm is desperate to play shortstop. He's desperate to play it. He wants to play it. He's always been a shortstop. There's a certain amount of gravitas that comes with playing shortstop versus second base. Jazz could play either position. When we saw him play shortstop a few years back at the major league level, it was spotty. It was definitely spotty, no doubt. Miguel Rojas is a better glove Chisholm right now. Anyway, from what we've seen, mainly because Miggy Rowe's consistency is so impressive. It's so consistent and looks effortless. but Miggy Rowe is an elite glove. No doubt. Absolutely none. And for a team that wants to play boring baseball, as Skip Schumacher says, boring baseball is outs, grounders to first, outs, outs, outs. That's what he's looking for. Ground balls, pitching machine, pitching defense, and then try to scratch enough runs across to get yourself the win. Miggy Rowe, for me, fits the profile, perhaps, of boring baseball. However, Jazz Chisholm wants to play shortstop. He does. He wants to. He will play it in the WBC for Great Britain. Let's go, Team GB. So we're going to see a bit of that from Jazz in that tournament, which is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be an uphill task for Great Britain to do anything to make some noise, but who knows? Who knows? Maybe Jazz and the stick can come alive. But back to the Marlins here now. You now have, does Jazz slide over to shortstop? That's the natural move now, in my opinion. If they peg Jean Segura in at second base, Jazz slides over to shortstop. What happens at third base? That is the question. And I actually, in my opinion, I don't think that this impacts third base whatsoever. I believe this is just my own opinion. When I look at this move, my own opinion says to me that in the next couple of days, Miguel Rojas will be traded by the Miami Marlins. I think Miguel Rojas' time in Miami is coming to an end. And I say that because there's a few things that I've seen. Firstly, reportedly, he's been in a few trade discussions, not just at the offseason, but also at the deadline. Feels like Miggy Rowe and the Marlins have maybe been shopping Miggy Rowe. That's just the vibe I get. He's also on a one-year deal. They're likely to not extend him anymore. Also, with Miggy Rowe, the offense wasn't good. The Marlins are looking to get better offensively. And the other main factor that plays into this, in my opinion, is Miguel Rojas last year, he was the man behind this players' meeting. And whatever you want to say about it, since that point, there was an issue. Miggy Rowe called the players' meeting via Don Mattingly. It was his meeting. It went sideways. That's on him. Miggy messed up there. And since then, in my opinion, his days have been numbered in Miami. This is Jazz's team now. Everything you see putting out from the Miami Marlins account right now is pro-Jazz. Everything you see from the players after that meeting was pro-Jazz. Cooper Loop, Jazz t-shirt. Other guys, Jazz t-shirts. They love him. They know he's a stud. They want to build around Jazz Chisholm. It was fractured. Miggy Rowe messed up. And I think the Marlins are going to move on and just allow Jazz to be Jazz without the handbrake on from Miguel Rojas. That's what I believe is going to happen in the next couple of days. And there's a market for Miggy Rowe, don't get me wrong. There's teams out there that will be very happy with Miguel Rojas at shortstop for 1 year or maybe even beyond. I don't know. But my gut feel is in the next couple of days, Miggy Rowe will no longer be a Marlin. I just can't see any other realistic situation here. They've brought in Segura. He plays at second base. So does Jazz. Jazz also plays shortstop. Jazz it's going to hurt the Marlins a touch defensively, no doubt. But offensively, Segura and Jazz versus Miggy and Jazz, it's an upgrade, guys. And we have to upgrade this offense. We cannot win games 1-0. We saw that last year. We can't. Miggy's on an expiring deal anyway. Trade him now, get a piece back, or package him with one of the pitchers for a team that desperately needs it. For an outfielder, that's the thing. What are the Giants doing? What do they need? What do the White Sox need? There's an interesting fit there. There's a few other teams out there. What do the Red Sox need? The Red Sox need something. There's trade partners out there for Miggy Rowe, and in my opinion, this will be the end. The other options, though, guys, we should think about it. Maybe Miggy slides over to third. Then all of a sudden, the same perhaps applies to Joey Wendell. Where does Joey Wendell fit in the whole grand scheme? And let's not forget, as I've already mentioned, Segura missed time last year, a lot of time. So did Jazz. They're going to need a backup plan at second base / shortstop if they go with that. So there's no... Actually, you could just have Miggy Rowe relegated to the bench. But going back to that point, this all stems from that players' meeting and the clubhouse being fractured last year. Miggy Rowe, he made the move, and he didn't kill the king. If you come for the king, you got to kill him, and they didn't. He didn't make it happen, and that in my opinion has led to this situation. John Birdie is still around. John Birdie, he had 41 stolen bases in 404 plate appearances. That's like one stolen bag every 10 plate appearances. Birdie's getting the same numbers. Birdie, with his control, he's absolutely on the roster. Wendell, though, is an expiring deal. So what do they do with Wendell? He absolutely could be movable right now. He could. The Marlins could explore that. They've already they sent away some prospects last year to get him. So I think they retain Wendell, not only because, let's think back last year, when Wendell, at the start of the year, it's a lefty stick. We need lefty sticks for certain. So I think he also, that's another thing in the kind of like, if it's Wendell or Rojas, I think Wendell's lefty stick plays. And if you think back to the early part of the year where the Marlins were kind of rolling-ish, I say that kind of loosely or lightly, when the Marlins were in the mix and in the hunt, Wendell was a big part of that. He came up with big hits in big spots all the time, opposite field knocks. Like Wendell looked like a professional hitter. Oh my days, it feels like Corey Dickerson all over again. But Wendell did. I want to prioritize offensive upgrades. The lefty stick, Wendell for me is a better hitter than Miguel Rojas. For me, I'd prefer to retain Wendell over Miggy Rowe. And then you've got Birdie, super util guy, and he'll be needed. And then you've got LeBlanc and Groshans that can kind of fill in when, if required. But for me, I think the Marlins go Cooper Loop at first. They need another first baseman too. Actually, Lewin Diaz is back on waivers. Did you see that? We're DFA'd again by the Braves. Lewin Diaz, no. Cooper Loop with another first baseman. Jean Segura at second base. Jazz Chisholm at shortstop. And Joey Wendell at third base. I think that's how they roll. Miguel Rojas traded. John Birdie, the super util. And then LeBlanc and Groshans also in the mix, plus a backup first baseman. That's what I think they do. This is big news for the Marlins. It's big news because they've added a hitter, which is great to see. They've added a guy that's proven, that can hit for average, that can hit for power at times, can steal a base, can play above average defense. It's a great deal on the face of it for the Marlins. The main impact here is the fact he plays second base. And then you then start to wonder, how do you piece all of the pieces together in the jigsaw to get the best possible lineup and construction and roster and clubhouse vibe? All of that combined. It is a tough and puzzling mix. Before we go and wrap up, it's time to let you know, and this one is always, listen, this is a big topic. It's New Year's Eve approaching, New Year's, and you're hanging out with some friends and putting a few drinks back. A few becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end, people start to head out. You think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. No big deal, right? What are the odds you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that can happen? Your insurance goes up, lose your license, lose your job, total your car, kill someone? Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save. If you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Always hard-hitting. The message, it's a message we should all take into account and adhere to, particularly as we get into the festive celebratory period, but in reality, every day. One more sip of coffee, then a summary, and then let's get out of here. Okay. Firstly, notifications were off. That was good news. A lot of action, a lot of buzz. The Marlins have done something. They've signed someone, and they've signed a player that I think makes them better. So that's a great start. Jean Segura, I think, will be a fun addition to this Marlins lineup and roster. Where does he hit great against lefties? We needed that. We need that badly. He also, the arm's nice, the swag's nice. I think he's going to be a fun guy. Him and Jazz playing middle infield together, I think, will be a lot of fun. I could probably see a nice chemistry going on there. What does it mean? I think the wider ramifications are going to be interesting. Let's wait and see how things play out in the next few days. But this, to me, clearly there's too many guys now. There's too many middle infielders. So something's got to give. What's that going to be? My gut feel is that Miguel Rojas' time in Miami is over, and he will be traded in the next few days, few weeks. I don't know. And I think it'll likely be as part of a bigger package, like they were trying to swing earlier in the the deadline. Sorry, with perhaps Pablo and Miggy to the Yankees as the Marlins were looking to go and get another impact stick. They still have to fill this hole at center field that has not yet been addressed. They still need some work at first base, and ideally a lefty stick there at first base, I think, would be nice. Still so much to do. The bullpen still needs looking at, but the Marlins have made their first move. I think it's a good one. The wider ramifications will be felt for the next few weeks, but as Marlins fans, we have to be happy. We have to be happy with this. This is probably one of the best players available in terms of the free agency board. They get a deal done. We'll wait to see what the actual contract structure is. But for me, good business done for the Marlins, but we need more. Look forward to seeing tomorrow, guys.